Now, countries reeling from the adverse effects of climate change may have to wait a little longer to access the loss and damage funds. Civil society groups and governments of countries affected by flooding, such as Kenya, are now calling for speedy decision on compensation. Now, Kenya has so far lost 257 lives from the floods as farmers in affected areas count losses of investments running into the millions, if not billions of shillings after 60,000 acres of crop were destroyed. Our very own Mashirima Kapombe reports on our weekly feature, Citizen Planet.
A picture of grief, despair and hopelessness covers areas devastated by the heavy rains that have wreaked havoc on Kenyans across the country.
Kisikia tu kuna mwili umepatikana tunakimbia mbio.
Saizi bado sijapata watoto wangu.
Losses that, according to the government, have left more than 250 people dead, displacement and destruction of thousands of acres of farmland.
Mafuno hatutakuwa naye mingi sababu mchere mingi ilimbebwa na maji.
Tulipanda mahindi, maharagwe na sote sikafunikwa.
Kuja kwa mashamba waone wale farmers wameguzwa na wajua wanaweza kompensetiwa na nini.
Farmers who had invested heavily now stare at an unpredictable season of food insecurity and financial turmoil.
Kwanza mimi kwa ekari moja tunaombanga loan 20,000. Saa hii hatuna hiyo shamba na tumepewa loan, tumepiga madawa, kila kitu. Kwa hivyo tuko na deni.
Na mimi kama mkulima sasa nimepoteza eka 10. Nimepanda na nimeenda hasara.
This loss is coming on the backdrop of the most severe drought in 40 years. A catastrophe that cost human life, food insecurity and the death of thousands of livestock.
People are talking of livestock dying. Nafikiria very soon wataona watu wakikufa.
A double tragedy for millions, not just in Kenya, but across Africa, who have experienced nature's wrath one after the other. Occurrences whose manifestation was predicted.
You go to the scientific reports, particularly the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they, more than even 10 years ago, even the latest, the assessment report, the latest one, the 7th assessment report, they are predicting that this will happen. They are predicting that some of these manifestations, drought, where there will come a drought, it will be intense and extreme. When there will be floods like what we are experiencing now, it will be extreme and intense. And of course, they come very radically.
December 2023 in Dubai, world leaders congregated for COP28 to not only take stock of steps taken towards the implementation of the Paris Agreement, which called for efforts to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade and reduce greenhouse emissions by 43% by 2030. But to also come up with a working formula by developed countries to compensate nations suffering loss and damage from climate-induced catastrophes.
This COP already showed the power of that unity on day one. Such historic advancement of the agenda and such historic consensus and agreement on the establishment and operationalization of the Loss and Damage Fund is a historic moment that no one can undermine or underestimate.
Voluntary contributions by the developed world to the Loss and Damage Fund and its operationalization became the highlight of the COP28. $700 million equivalent to 91 billion, 700 million Kenya shillings was pledged within days. 5 months later, the fund is yet to live up to the promise it was hoped to be.
The COP28 last year in Dubai, we were very upbeat and that pledges again were made. But if none of that comes to rescue the Kenyan situation, it is talk shop.
Now, 5 months after COP28, where the Loss and Damage Fund was operationalized, the board of the fund responding to loss and damage met for the first time in Abu Dhabi earlier this month, beginning with a process to select its executive director and launched work on access modalities, financial instruments, and facilities, amongst other agenda. Now, the 26-member board constitutes representatives from the developed countries who take the lion's share of membership with 12 slots. Asia-Pacific states taking about 3 slots as indicated, and Latin American and Caribbean states also taking 3 slots, as well as the small island developing states. The least developed countries taking 2 slots. Now, Africa is represented by South Africa, Zambia, Egypt, and Benin. The 3-day inaugural meeting also provided an opportunity for the newly constituted board to engage the World Bank, which is set to initially host the fund for 4 years, pending confirmation by June 12, 2024. An idea that brought out strong resistance from developing countries at the COP28, but the board exchanged views with the World Bank on ensuring the most vulnerable can directly access support from the fund. An agenda that Kenya, as other vulnerable countries, are keenly following.
We must rethink what we are calling climate finance. It has to be accessible. Where is it? Where is it when we need it the most right now? You know, it must be flexible so that the parameters and thresholds that are put around how to access the money by suffering countries, it should not wait until when we are almost at the tipping point. And what you get when you're almost at the tipping point comes in the form of loans.
As countries await the fulfillment of the promise to compensate for the losses incurred, experts are calling on nations to be keen in building resilience and taking warnings of climate events seriously.
You are constructing a road. Let's say the Isiolo Mondogashe Moyale Road. You know where this road is passing through, there is always these floods. And because it is going to rain, what are you going to do? You ensure that you construct in mind that you are going to experience what you are experiencing, so that wherever you are putting culvert, you raise it in such a way that it is going to withstand. That is what we are calling resilience.
And as the wait continues, for the communities who have lost loved ones, a place to call home and livelihoods, compensation couldn't come at a better time than now. Mashirima, Kapombe for Citizen Planet.